Live.
There it is. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm with you.
From
Let's
the
go.
ISS vending machine floor. They have a whole floor to vending machines. I've just learned.
Well, didn't we do this live from Glass Lewis's
Pickleball court?
Pickleball courts or backgammon game.
The CFO of ISS just called me to say that one floor of their entire headquarters is only snacks. It's only snack machine, vending machine. This is why the Republicans have ESG month. This is why they're mad. Too many snacks at the ISS.
I didn't read that in their briefings.
It's the ESG industry's only weekly woke data podcast featuring BM Man, Matt Moscardi.
Oh no, that's way worse than BS.
In today's Elbow Super Gus called July 19th, 2023. Maybe the biggest ESG-ish headlines ever, I'm going to say. This is like, I was nerding out yesterday, Matt, last night. On my couch, doing my headlines. It was like 10 p.m. It was hot. I have no AC in this room I was working in. And I thought to myself, these might be like the biggest ESG headlines I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Not only that, they might be the biggest free flow analytics headlines ever released.
We have an anti-woke update from Matt Moscardi. Do we? Do you have an anti-woke update today?
No, I just kind of have a board update is what I have.
And
I'm going to bore you with my board updates.
And we do have a word from our sponsor. Our show today is being sponsored by S-Gage, your ESG data solutions provider.
Yeah,
Paul.
I love a good sponsor.
Paul is driving down today.
Yeah.
He'll be stopping in later in the show to talk about director compensation.
Yeah, into the Free Float Portland studios.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, great show. The show's also
is it
brought
over?
by Free Float Analytics.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks
Free
for
Float
coming.
Analytics, sure.
And don't forget, freefloatanalytics.com. Get your free data. Part of that data is S-Gage data. Amazing S-Gage data.
More importantly, go there for the beautiful graphics.
Yeah, I love looking in the eyes of the directors that run my companies.
Yeah, because even if you're not like attached to our data, there's a nice purples and there's just nice data. There's nice colors on the website.
I mean, first of all, why aren't you attached to our data?
Well,
but what do we got? We got a big show today. Let's do it. It's Woke Wednesday, in which most things are not that woke anymore.
I mean, these top three headlines potentially are just the biggest headlines we've ever seen in this for this show. In no particular order. First, the Tesla board to return $735 million in stock awards to end lawsuit over pay packages.
Whoa! That's a lot of pay.
It's incredible. This is an incredible. I mean, I had to read this like 6 times. It's like, is this this is a settlement agreement, Matt? So it's done, right? There's not going to be an appeal.
Well, I'll get to it a little bit later.
You will.
There are probably good reasons why they settled.
Okay. Well, okay.
Yeah.
This was a case brought to by the Detroit Police and Fire Retirement Fund. Okay.
Good for them.
And they claimed that by paying the board directors an unfair and excessive compensation, the board deprived shareholders of significant sums of money. Of course, right.
Let's just be clear.
Yeah.
Before we go any further, you said directors. This is not about Elon Musk's CEO pay.
No, that case that's another case that's still happening. This is just director pay.
Director pay.
This lawsuit accused Musk of stacking the board with friends and family, ensuring outcomes he wanted.
Wow, we're shocked. I can't believe it.
And avoiding independent oversight. I love the way they say this. They say this better than we've ever said it. They accuse Musk of stacking the board to ensure outcomes he wanted and to avoid independent oversight. That's what you're doing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
It's not just giving your friends jobs. Well, that's a part of
that's
it,
or nice your perk,
or your brother. But you're basically just ensuring that you get your way.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what you're doing. You made your boss the people that you like and who like you.
Also as a shout out against the horrible say-on-pay system in the U.S. where it's non-binding votes, they reminded in the lawsuit the court that a majority of independent Tesla shareholders rejected changes to director pay in 2014 and 2019. So shareholders actually had a voice in this, but they didn't listen. Anyway, so this group of director defendants, it's a long list, and it includes Elon. He's part of it. Includes Elon's brother Kimball. They are going to have to give back 3.1 million stock options valued at roughly $750 million.
Can I say here too? One of the things that you just said is non-binding. So we just booked House Representative Sean Casten from Illinois, who's on the House Finance Committee. Okay. He's forced to go to all these stupid hearings. And one of the things that he did...
What do you mean booked him? We didn't arrest him. What do you mean we booked him?
No, I mean he's coming on this show.
Oh, he's coming on the show. Okay.
He's coming on this show. Sure. Next week, we're going to record.
And then maybe after that, we'll arrest him.
Well, he doesn't know that yet.
We haven't decided that yet.
He had a back and forth with the people testifying, in which he asked a very simple question that Nell Minow, the godmother of governance, said the answer to. He asked, "Are these votes binding? Does anybody have to listen to your advice, ISS?" The answer was no. Are the votes binding after you give the advice? The answer was no. And then he was like, "What are we doing here? Why are we wasting our time with this?" Because it's true. It only becomes binding when it's a legal settlement. Because they don't have to listen otherwise. One
part of the settlement agreement, and what it doesn't answer though is what you're just asking: will this be binding? The inference here is yes, but one part of the settlement agreement is that Tesla shall submit the proposed annual pay to these non-employee directors to an approval vote of the majority of unaffiliated Tesla stockholders every year, which basically means that people like Elon won't have a say in it. But it doesn't say whether this will be binding. But this is highly unusual corporate governance practice that you're now going to have to ask the non-connected shareholders whether they approve of specifically director pay.
This is the second time that the courts have forced a nanny on Elon Musk.
Yes.
The first time being this board was forced to create a committee called the Disclosure Committee.
Yes.
That reviewed his tweets.
And they stripped him, and they stripped his chair role.
At some point, do we say there aren't enough nannies? Maybe the guy shouldn't have 700 jobs simultaneously? I mean, how many nannies is too many nannies?
Well, I'm glad you talk about this because what the lawsuit doesn't cover, because they're not yet subscribers to our data, is that despite all this, despite the fact that Elon Musk does not control the company by just share voting power, and despite the fact that there's a one share, one vote system, Elon still controls 72% of the influence on the board, according to our data, and his brother controls 8% of the influence. So while it's good they have to give back these options, it doesn't really solve the initial problem, right?
No,
we haven't solved his oversized influence over what should be an independent board.
Which I suppose answers the question, how many nannies is too many nannies? We actually have 0 real nannies because nobody has influence over Musk. Musk still controls it all, right?
Yeah, what I would have liked to see here is for this, and I don't know the negotiation of this settlement, so it's possible that they did ask for certain governance changes that didn't go through. What I would have liked to see here as maybe an important precedent to U.S. corporate governance is to suggest the very easy solution to boot Elon Musk from the Tesla board, because it's not like you're not gonna limit his power and control at the company, but what you are going to ensure is that there will be an independent oversight board in place, right? So I wonder if they did suggest this, but that's the only remedy here is to get these U.S. CEOs off their boards. It's ridiculous. They don't need to be on their boards. They don't need to be on their boards.
I don't know why it is a precedent, and it's a relatively global precedent, that the boss of the company sits in the room with their bosses and makes decisions.
Oftentimes,
I don't know why that's the precedent.
Matt, and oftentimes they lead that body. They're the chair of that body. Not only are they in the room, but they set the agenda for the discussion.
Can you imagine when you were like a
I
mid-level
wish.
analyst?
Oh, I wish.
When your bosses are discussing your pay
And I was in
they're
control.
discussing the agenda. If they were like, "Why don't you come in? We're going to talk with you about you."
Yeah.
Like it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. You got a note on your desk that said you're fired. That was it.
So this is Free Flow's way of saying, let's start to get CEOs off of U.S. boards. Let's start.
I like all this. I like your ideas.
I know.
I would like to subscribe to your newsletter. Is it available?
At least one Fortune 500 CEO should volunteer and just reach out to us. We can do a press release like through our show. Maybe you're going to step down. You're going to be a corporate governance pioneer. Nell Minow will be your new best friend. We can make that happen. We'll get this going. Yeah.
It doesn't even have to happen to all of them because we can use our data to just show the ones that should step down, the ones with an outsized influence. Our data will tell you.
And maybe, okay, next story. Ready?
Okay, I'm ready, yeah.
Maybe even bigger
segue.
news. Maybe this is even bigger ESG news for our. I'm just excited to get to the next story because, again, I haven't seen such big, juicy ESG headlines like this in a while. Blackrock names Saudi Aramco CEO Amin Nasser to its board. I mean, I couldn't believe. I was just like, my jaw was on the floor. So after all this pushback against Larry Fink for being way too woke and there's too much ESG, he has taken the ultimate step. He's appointed the CEO of Saudi Aramco to the board of Black. I mean, I don't know. I'm speechless. Speechless.
Let's come back to this one.
Oh,
because I'll just say this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kabuki theater with this choice.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Larry Fink basically saying, "Oh yeah, Republicans, you think you're the only one who can do kabuki theater? Welcome to corporate kabuki theater, in which we put whoever we want on our boards and make it look like we're super oil friendly or not, or we signal something that does or does not matter." Because the reality is 50% of the board influence is controlled by 3 people on the BlackRock board. Those people are Larry Fink, founder of BlackRock, Susan Wagner, founder of BlackRock, and Rob Capito, CEO of BlackRock, like the future CEO.
I'm glad you pointed that out because what's lost in the discussion is that it's supposed to be an independent board. It's supposed to be a board that represents first shareholders, maybe stakeholders. Don't forget Larry Fink was the one who introduced the idea of stakeholder capitalism. So it's not a crazy thought.
Apparently, it's making somebody crazy.
But notice that it's BlackRock who is naming the CEO, the CEO of Saudi Aramco to the board, right? It's not this. It's not an independent nomination committee. It's Larry Fink. It's the founders.
It's Larry.
Yeah, it's Larry is the CEO and chair of that board, and one of its founders. And yeah, it's again. You want to
know who the largest holder of Saudi Aramco's IPO, their debt IPO, and their IPO?
I guess I want to know.
It's BlackRock. That's
okay.
who it is.
Let's not forget that Larry Fink is probably in the succession planning phase of his career anyway. A lot of reports.
I think it's done. Capito, I think, is it.
So, is this a succession statement? Is he trying to say something here? I know you don't want to go too deep onto this yet. We'll be talking about this for many weeks ahead, but
I will make this prediction alert, okay? That's my prediction alert sound effect.
Okay.
It's a giant gong. Larry Fink steps down as CEO of BlackRock into the Bob Iger role of executive chair. Of course, obviously. Rob Capito is at the Bob Chapek.
The boomerang holder. He'll be shining the boomerang.
Susan Wagner and Larry Fink still sit on the board as co-founders. One's executive chair, one's just a co-founder. And Capito, it's one screw up away from the entire board just bringing back Larry Fink. I predict that before 2030, Larry Fink boomerangs back as the CEO of BlackRock. And he hasn't even stepped down yet. That's my prediction.
Is this, one more thing before we get off of BlackRock. Is this a victory for the anti-ESG crowd? Is this a direct result of their shareholder activism that they are against in the first place? Because this really is old-fashioned shareholder activism, right? Like you rattle the cage for a bit and maybe you get some kind of concession. Is that what this is? No, not what this is.
Not even. I'll tell you why. It's not even close.
Mm-hmm. Tell me.
I'll tell you why later in my segment.
Oh, I see. I didn't know you were teasing your segment. I'm
teasing.
I'm not aware of anything. All right. Moving on. Another big. Although those two are the biggest. I mean, it's hard to top that one. But another big one in our world is that Vivek Ramaswamy's investment firm, which we've talked about a lot, called Strive Asset Management. They position themselves as the anti-woke, anti-ESG investment firm to trying to take
they said it explicitly.
Trying to take the politics out of investing.
Pro-excellence.
Pro-excellence. You know, CEO's role is not to talk about people or feelings or politics or anything. They are in the news today because the investment firm dials back its anti-woke rhetoric. They sent a letter to investors and acknowledge that they are seen as more political over investment oriented, turning off investors and limiting its opportunities to grow. So there you go.
Wow. You know, who'd have thought that somebody would not want to invest in a company that says, oh, all those other companies have a lot of data. Well, we want to use less data to invest and only focus on a select bit of data and exclude all other data. And actually, we're not going to invest. We're actually just going to lease an index from somebody else and vote. So the only thing they do is vote for or against directors or shareholder proposals. Their principles are to vote against. Wasn't Vivek's first principle
DEI.
to vote against DEI anywhere there's a racial equity audit?
Yeah, diversity.
And those, if you actually think about what a racial equity audit is, it's a report that offers transparency about the people at the company, right? That's what it does.
Mm-hmm.
Am I confused about what an audit is? It's a report, right?
Yeah.
So their founding principle was we want less
data, less disclosure,
less data,
less transparency,
disclosure,
less knowledge for you to make an investment decision.
We are happy to vote against more women than everybody else who are on boards. And they somehow are seen as political and nobody wants to invest in that? I can't believe it.
I was just watching a video posted on LinkedIn by its head of corporate governance, Justin Danaher, I think his name is. And
Danhoff.
Danhoff. And I can see why investors are turned off because he clowns himself constantly by he's blaming the cancellations at Southwest Airlines and the lost luggage over a very small sliver of an executive pay that is used to make a subjective assessment based on a DEI ESG component. Again, it's not tied. It's not tied to any objective criteria. It's a very small percentage of overall annual pay. And he claims that is the reason why their share price is tanking and why they lost all that luggage. So I would assume that any investor who sees this thinks that this is a clown show. Like they're not serious people.
Was that about Southwest in particular?
This was particularly about Southwest Airlines, yes.
Okay, well, Justin.
Yeah.
We did an analysis of Southwest board. And it turns out that all of the things that you said are stupid. Because
it's either a misunderstanding of what proxy data is, or it's an intentional misunderstanding to come up with some bullshit political message.
I mean,
so why is he?
Sounds like half dozen one.
Why is he wrong, Matt?
So we did the analysis, right? We actually, and I can tell you, we looked at everybody on the board. So, for instance, we looked at Bill Cunningham, who has been on the board for like 20 years and is best friends with Gary Kelly and a whole bunch of other board members. Strive voted for Bill Cunningham. Mm-hmm. Bill Cunningham is like we could identify as one of the highly interconnected, really old, sort of outsized influence directors that has repeatedly not funded tech upgrades to A, track your luggage, and
Right.
B, make sure that tickets work and that schedules work. If you want to know the DEI problem, it's that you have not enough of the DEI on the board or in management. Maybe that's your problem.
I remember us pointing out that Southwest in particular is it's a very old board. It's
super old.
It seems like
it's
an outlier
off the
for
charts
age.
Old. It was off the charts.
And the one thing that you'll notice if you take DEI seriously, so when we say DEI, let's say it for what they're saying it is. It's black people and women. That's what they mean by DEI.
Yeah, that's
okay,
and gays if they could figure out who
if they
were.
can find them. But what that class of directors, what they do represent, because we can see it in the data, is they're just younger overall.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That might be a start to finding people who understand tech, for instance. Just find some younger people.
Yeah. I like that. I actually, maybe I'll make that a whole segment. I want to play that whole video.
The article also pointed out that there's a new CEO over at Strive Asset Management, a man, actually, believe it or not, who came from CalPERS, the giant California pension fund, a man named Matt Cole, who spent 16 years running bond portfolios.
Yeah. Did he run them, or was he like an associate underneath a portfolio manager?
I like that this is their version of a non-political figure, Matt, to run their company is described this way. He's a deeply religious Christian, but not outwardly political.
Okay.
That's their solution to clean up like the rampant right-wing politics over there at Stripe. So there you go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just so you know, we do something called the influence weighted age of a company. So you can take the most influential person, or multiply their influence times their age, and look at how old a company's decision makers are, rather than how old they are on average. And Southwest was the 99th percentile amongst all airlines. It was by far the oldest of all airlines, and tenure as well. They were their average tenure, or the influence weighted tenure, was like 10 years, where Delta, JetBlue, American, all under 8 years.
Let me give you one more quote from Strive. This is Matt Cole, new CEO over at Strive. He says, "Don't get me wrong. We believe that shareholders are more important than other stakeholders." And
well, maybe it's the other stakeholders that lost your fucking luggage.
Which is odd, because you're by being too political, you are kind of bowing to the stakeholder sentiment, right? To other stakeholder sentiment. But anyway, he also says, "We do think the corporate ESG movement has been value destructive and politically motivated. It started with don't hire slave labor in China, and now it's become something else." What is this misunderstanding of the historical timeline of ESG anyway, Matt? Like what does that mean? It started with don't hire slave labor in China. What understanding of the movement does he have that I don't have?
I'm not sure.
What is he talking about? What is he talking about?
It started 3,000 years ago, right? Like it's actually older than like traditional capitalism, and it had nothing to do with China.
But what is he specifically even referring to? The Uyghur Labor Act?
There's some deep obsession. Well, they're trying to connect the political talking point that he's using in his apolitical. Yeah,
explain this to me, because he sounds like a moron.
They've been trying to connect how corporations don't care about using Uyghurs in China, but they do care about employing more black people in America. Like, this is the hypocrisy of the woke capitalist movement.
But the inference here, when he says it started with don't hire slave labor in China, now it's become something else, it sounds to me he's saying that the don't hire slave labor in China thing was okay. That was fine. That was good.
No, I don't. Maybe he's saying that it started off with good intentions, like no slave labor in China.
But why is that good intentions? If they don't believe in stakeholder capitalism, why is that good? That should be bullshit too.
Why do they care? Yeah, why do they care? We should use more slave labor, shouldn't we?
And
Isn't that better for shareholders?
Yeah, and what's odd is that I did a deep dive onto the ESG working group members of the Congress who were part of this ESG month, and to all of them, all 100% of them voted. There was a Uyghur Act in Congress a couple of years ago. They all voted for that. That's like the only socially left human rights ESG-esque thing that they all seem to support. I just wish someone would explain to me why, Matt. Why is that ESG nugget okay, but all of the rest of it is shit? I don't understand.
Because it's anti-China.
It's anti-China. Got it.
It's just, so it's really
the Uyghurs are Muslims. I mean, so that's what's weird.
China.
Yeah, so I don't understand. They're pro-Muslim for once, but
no, they're not pro-Muslim. They're anti-China.
They're anti-China. But this again, this is a very ESG move. But it's a very ESG move to care about labor and stakeholders.
The grand irony is, if you were to back out and you were to say what is best for shareholders, period, like what is the pinnacle of best for shareholders, it would be there's no labor costs, as in every one of your workers was enslaved, or you minimize the cost of them. It would be that like TSR share price goes up, which means you should be able to manipulate it in any way possible. That's great for shareholders. You manipulate the cost up. Like the best thing for shareholders is using slave labor in China. That is the best thing for shareholders.
Slave labor anywhere.
Yeah, just find somebody, enslave them, and that's great for you.
Moving on, the Biden administration.
Are you tired yet?
Yeah, the Biden administration reveals tougher guidelines on mergers, showing its commitment to an aggressive antitrust agenda aimed at curtailing the powers of big tech. This is saying the biggest antitrust movement since priorities established under Ronald Reagan. The only thing that's unclear to me here, and they're going to announce more details into this big push later today, I think, is in light of the fact that the FTC chair, Lina Khan's, quote unquote, failure to control the merger between Microsoft and Activision. What does this mean? What do these tougher guidelines mean? Do they mean anything, or is this kind of political fodder? I don't know.
I don't care. Just wake me up when you break up Meta.
We break up something.
Do something.
I would agree. And I would just, when Lina Khan or Joe Biden call me, I would tell you, just start with Meta and don't quit until you're done. Just keep at Meta. Keep at it.
I don't understand why, we even tried to make an example of the Microsoft Activision.
I don't understand that one either.
Like 7 bros in their basement play Call of Duty, and that's where we're making our stand?
Yeah, I don't understand
You
either.
have a company that has more than 80% of the entire industry consolidated underneath it. And that company is not a company. It's one guy with dual class shares.
It's not just like 80% of an industry like selling phones or selling I don't even know, like Gmail or something stupid like that. It's literally the means to which we communicate with each other. It's the way that it's the way the Earth talks to each other and broadcasts news. I mean,
it's unbelievable that we're making our stand about Call of Duty.
Moving on, there was a big report out of the BBC yesterday about a toxic culture of sexual assault, harassment, racism, and bullying at the McDonald's.
Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me. I want to guess the company.
Yeah, it's too late. I think I already said it.
It's any company. This could be any company.
That might be true, unfortunately. But this is covering 100 current and recent UK staff at McDonald's. The BBC began investigating the working conditions at McDonald's in February after the company signed a legally binding agreement with the Equality and Human Rights Commission in which it pledged to protect its staff from sexual harassment. So this is what came after the BBC independently. I will say what's interesting. The reason why I'm covering this story today is I'm always fascinated with the way media, the way it portrays business news in general. Is that this is a big story out of the BBC, a big story on some outlets, but when I go to like CNBC and I click on McDonald's to look at their recent news, nothing. So I don't know. I'm just fascinated with this kind of stuff. Like this is stakeholder capitalism, right? This would be stakeholder capitalism news, no?
So Strive does not care about this,
Right, okay.
Because they don't care at all about this.
Well, and the next,
although I
yeah.
will say this, and we don't talk about this much here, but Scott Galloway on Pivot and the Prof G podcast talks about this all the time. He's writing a book on it.
Okay.
He talks a lot about masculinity and toxic masculinity and recapturing masculinity and stuff like that.
Recapturing masculinity. Has it gone somewhere?
It's the idea that there's like this, like men don't know anymore how to be men because they've defined themselves basically as a bunch of, gropey, smoking steer herders. I don't know what they define themselves as. So now it's difficult, and men are more likely to commit suicide now. They're less likely to have an education. They're more likely to be lost in the job market. Like all of these stats, a lot of which I understand. But I will say when I read a story like this, maybe rule number one could be stop groping people. Like there just shouldn't, like a sexual, like touching someone ever when they don't want you to or they didn't ask for it. Can't that just be rule number one? That's not manly. That's not masculine. It just strikes me whenever I see these stories is like, what is that instinct? Stop it.
Here's another reason why I'm covering this is that, and then in the next iteration of our beautiful platform, Free Flow Analytics, when we're finally able to tag our content to the companies and to
when we have
stickers,
a client,
you'll be able to go to the McDonald's page and not only see, we'll be able to see the performance of the board members and see their influence, but you'll also be able to see stories like this right alongside. It won't be like CNBC.
That is happening.
Won't be
That
like
is
CNBC.
happening.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. And finally, before I move on to you, Matt, I did do I spent way too much of a time in a deep dive on the ESG working group members. I
like this.
This is the Republicans in the Congress who are spearheading this ESG month, self-titled ESG month.
Yeah, they called it that. Yeah.
ESG month. I don't want to bore you with this. Here are my takeaways. I kind of gave up after the first three people I looked into, Bill Huizenga, Ann Wagner, and Barry Loudermilk. The one thing that was clear to me, which is also clear at Strive, is that this is very much based in a religious movement. And I'm not saying that
always has been
based on subjective criteria. I'm just saying objectively I found that these people are very much aligned with a Christian movement. Okay? But again, I stopped looking into that because I got bored and scared. The other thing I wanted to tell you is this tidbit because it tickled me. Andy Ogles from Tennessee, one of the ESG working group members working to basically get rid of ESG. I like this part of his story. He's a self-proclaimed economist who, according to so journalists looked into his background. Despite being a self-proclaimed economist, right, who would seem like a good member to be on this ESG working group, right, because you need people who understand finance or the economy. It turns out he took only one community college economics course, which he barely passed.
Okay.
And that at college he enrolled in the U.S. presidency, problems in government, political theory, and national security policy, and he failed every one of these courses. 3 years later, he took them again and failed them again. I looked at this. This is from a newspaper in Tennessee. I looked at his transcript, and indeed, I've never seen this before. He got an F in all of those courses, and yes, he took them again and get an F again. Like this is one of the. This is one of the key members of the ESG working group working to destroy ESG, is a guy who lies not only about his background and educational record, but also it's just kind of a general failure.
Well, he did say about that there was a hack. He blamed his educational background on a hack. Also said he doesn't remember saying he had an economics degree.
Yeah. I'll tell you why it's not a hack, because this transcript that this newspaper found was from 13 years ago, and it was like there's a picture of it. It's definitely like a printed transcript that us old people used to get. This is not a hack created by some weird website. I mean, this is a physical transcript.
Well, I will also say that it is a little bit dubious, his claims, because his not only his educational background was found to be semi-fraudulent to fraudulent.
Yeah.
He also then claimed he worked in like a whole bunch of other places that he never worked.
Yes.
He might be. Is Is he the original? Who's the rep from New York that is horrible now?
George Santos.
Yeah, he's the original George Santos,
Okay.
maybe.
And the only reason why I'm pointing this out is because as you're working, Ogles, whatever your name is, as you're working to destroy ESG, you're realizing that this is why, say, the G is so goddamn important, is that it allows us to understand who these people are and what they're up to, and then you give investors the choice of whether they want, just like in the real democracy, in the alternative democracy, now we have the choice as investors whether maybe we want to vote this director out for being a fat, dumb liar.
Yeah, that's correct.
I actually have no proof that he's fat. I have no proof of that.
No.
But he's a dumb liar. I do have proof he's a dumb liar.
Proof of the other things.
All right, I've talked way too much. I've talked.
Let's do something.
Come on,
now.
you do something.
It's totally similar. In fact, it's exactly the same. Here's what I have for you. It's why your board matters. You pulled two of the biggest board-related stories
Ever.
in ESG, maybe ever.
For our show,
and those two
definitely.
things were the Tesla board clawback of board pay.
Nearly $1 billion clawback.
Like $750 million.
Incredible.
And Blackrock adding CEO of Saudi Aramco to their board.
Biggest
here's
troll
what I
ever.
have to say.
Biggest troll ever.
Let's start with Tesla, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The lawsuit accused, and you said this already, Musk of stacking the board with his friends and family, ensuring outcomes he wanted, and avoiding independent oversight. I am not going to say this is Elon Musk's fault, nor am I going to say this is the board's fault.
Okay.
I am going to say this is the fault of shareholder capitalism.
Ooh.
And do you want to know why?
Yeah, sure.
Here are the votes for directors in the last 4 years for the Tesla board members. Now, Tesla has a classified board, so you can't vote them all in.
It's part of the problem, yeah.
They can't even get, every year there's been a proposal to either reduce the term of directors from 3 years to 2 years or to make it one share, one vote. And they cannot get 66%. They need 66% supermajority to agree. And they
again,
can't get that.
Just so we're clear, this is yet another mechanism that Elon Musk uses to maintain control over the board because if shareholders get angry one year, they can't vote everybody out at once.
But apparently, part of the problem here is Elon Musk only owns now he owns about 13% of the shares, but he's owned, between 18, 16, 13% of shares. So he hasn't had enough by himself to kill the supermajority. If you add up him and his friends, they still don't have enough to kill the supermajority. What does that mean? That means there are enough other investors who own shares in this company who continue to side with Elon Musk. The same is true with the directors. If I exclude Elon Musk's votes, Robin Denholm named in the suit, in 2023, the real vote was 30% against her. Now, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But that actually means that's a whole lot for her.
Sure.
70% of the other shareholders said she's good to go. JB Straubel, his best friend, 16% against was the real number. In 2022, Ira Arenpris, 33% against, still 2/3 voting for. Kathleen Wilson-Thompson, 30% against. That means 70% for. Denholm in 2020, this suit goes back from 2018 to 2022. Denholm got only 13% against. Everyone liked her. You don't stack the board without accomplices. That's my point.
Yeah. The amazing thing to me, Matt, is that Kimball Musk, he gets voted through.
He gets voted through. In fact, in 2023, ISS suggested you vote against JB Straubel because of conflicts of interest with Elon Musk.
Yeah.
They suggested you vote for Kimball Musk.
This is one of the proxy advisory that Republicans are so angry about. They're so weak when it comes to actually exercising its power over corporations that they won't even tell shareholders to maybe having your brother on the board is a bad one.
Maybe it's not the best idea. You mentioned that this is the Detroit Police and Fire Retirement Fund. One of the rabbit holes I went down was trying to find how they voted on Tesla over the last 5 years.
Okay.
No data. They don't disclose it at all. It's nowhere. There's not even a policy. I couldn't find whether they use Glass Lewis or ISS or they do it themselves or somebody else. I couldn't find anything. But my guess is even the Detroit Police and Fire Pension Fund was voting for some or all of these directors.
Why is that your guess?
That's my guess because they outsource all of the votes to proxy advisors who have uniformly voted in, said it's okay, it's cool to vote for these people. So they only care when they sue. But when it comes to exercising your shareholder right, investors, where are you? You're an accomplice. That $750,000 shouldn't go back to Tesla and their shareholders because you're the fucking idiots who keep allowing Elon Musk to have a stacked board. It's a one share, one vote company. Vote the fuckers out. But what we've been told when we try to sell them our data is that it's really aggressive to vote against a director. We've been told that by institutional, highly sophisticated shareholders that our data suggesting that people underperform and that you could vote against them because you have data to support that would be really aggressive.
Which is odd.
That's a quote, really aggressive.
Which is odd to me because I would see it as an aggressive act if you controlled the voting power. Like if you had 53% of the vote and your vote against a director meant like that director was gone, I could see that as an aggressive act. But you're talking about investment companies that control probably less than 1% of the vote, right? And that's seen as an aggressive act?
No, even if you controlled 10% of the vote,
which rarely happens, though. I'm gonna say that even that's very high. Yeah,
like their job, they are hiring someone to steward their capital.
No, I realize, but it's not controlling the vote, though.
Imagine if someone said to you, it would be really aggressive for me to say that you're not good at your job and I was your boss.
It's odd.
Like I hired you.
It's odd.
Like we hire and fire people in this country like it's nothing. Unless you're a union, it's like you can get fired tomorrow for no reason. You just get a slip in the mail. It says like, sorry, you're 2 weeks or and you're gone.
I mean,
and yet it's really aggressive to vote against a director who you are hiring to steward your capital. That's what their job is.
And my main takeaway here, especially since it's ESG month, is that this once again proves that the ESG industry, investment firms, they're not slowly dismantling corporations and voting against management. Course not. They're keeping it going, not only because they just don't. There is no agenda to break down capitalism, but also because they're even too afraid to look like they care. According to
it actually, a quote like that to me proves our theory that capitalism is not a science. It's not about cash flows. It is a kabuki theater. It is a social construct. Because if you are afraid, if you're too much of your directors are so snowflakey about getting a vote against them, and you're afraid to offend them, then that's not capitalism. That's not excellence. That's not measurement. That's not data. You're doing that because you're afraid your buddy at the golf course is going to be pissed with your vote.
Right.
That is the absolute wrong system. In fact, Strive the only thing they might be doing right is they aggressively vote against directors.
I don't agree that they vote against all the women. Female directors, yeah.
But they're doing it. Right? Like they're doing what more investors should be doing if they use data, if they actually had a theory of the universe.
I was going to say, you're also supporting once again why you don't want to get rid of ESG data. I don't care how you use it, but you never want to eliminate different ways to evaluate the people.
I've got an idea. Let's have less
running
data.
your company. Yeah.
Which brings me to number 2 about Tesla. The settlement wasn't ever about friends and pay on the board. In fact, Tesla and their board settled because during the discovery process, the judge presiding was about to release communications with their auditor. So they would have had to release a whole bunch of audited communications with PwC and communications between a director and Tesla's general counsel. Steve Jurvetson was complaining he didn't get enough compensation. He didn't get compensation he thought he was entitled to. Probably because he only got $1.2 million in director compensation compared to Kathleen Wilson Thompson, who made $7.3 million in the year of the communication.
Wow.
In options
To put
and
this
in cash.
To put this number into perspective, the entire Southwest board, which is about 12, 13, 14 members, in aggregate made just over $1 million last year.
Correct. Yeah.
So this is one director who made $1.2 million and is upset about it.
These are people who were complaining that they weren't making enough and they were getting $1.2 million in options.
I don't even know how they were allowed
that year. That was 2020, right?
I don't even know how the SEC or the listing exchange allowed these directors to call themselves independent after getting so much money, honestly. But
really, my takeaway was not like this is a great G moment where we're clawing back finally, and congrats to the Detroit police and fire pension.
Yeah.
This was that if investors actually cared and did their fucking jobs, they would be voting totally differently. Musk would not have more than 70% of the board influence. Kimball Musk would never be there. He's still on the board. ISS still recommended him. It shouldn't be the case, period. So that's number one with Tesla.
Okay.
Number two with Blackrock, and I'll keep it short because it can't be a 7-hour show.
I can't yawn another 455 times.
Yeah, I know. It's great for the live stream when you're yawning, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Anyway, we still have Paul coming up. Paul, I'm not saying that Paul is yawn worthy. I'm just saying we have to make. Paul has been waiting in my green room for 20 minutes.
Well, he can wait for another 30 seconds because BlackRock adds the CEO of Saudi Aramco to the board. This is a board, as I said, 50% controlled by Fink, Wagner, and Capito. All BlackRock founders or insiders. All the other directors, we think that this is like, oh, we're signaling something to the Republicans, like look how oil friendly we are, or we are moving off of ESG. If you had actually looked at who's on the board now, they already had a member who sits on the board of Kuwait Petroleum Fund.
Oh.
Bader al-Assad already is an oil director.
Wow.
Like we needed another one for what? They have another director who sits on the board of U.S. Steel and Halliburton and Gerber.
Wow.
60% of this board is already connected in 2 degrees or less. They all know each other. This is pure optics. This is just a dog and pony show. This isn't real.
This is why, we back when Larry Fink and BlackRock became the target of the anti-woke and the anti-ESG. This is why we giggled for 3 days straight, because there's no one in the ESG world who ever considered BlackRock to be woke or to be ESG
that was the
company.
Joke. We made fun of them.
That's why we giggled. Yeah.
We giggled for years.
So it's no surprise to us that Strive Asset Management is already sort of changing its tone and tenor because you don't know what the hell you're talking about in general.
Shall we let's bring in.
Yeah, because I'm too ranty today. Let's bring in Paul to calm us down.
All right, Paul, come on in. Let's listen to what you have to say.
Hello there, Paul Hodgson with S-Gage Statistic of the Week. So for the last few weeks we've been talking about CEO compensation. And this week I've decided to switch over to looking at some of our statistics on director compensation. So first of all, we're going to look at a comparison between the S&P 500 directors and Russell 3000 directors. The comparison between the packages is not a very differential one. Over 97% of directors in both indices receive cash retainers, and almost 90% of the Russell 3000 directors and just over 96% of directors in the S&P 500 also receive stock awards. Now, stock option awards, which have been going out of fashion for some time now, are slightly more common in the Russell 3000 than they are in the S&P 500, 13.6% of directors receiving them in the larger index, and only 7.4%, roughly half, receiving them in the S&P 500. Similarly, meeting fees, 7.6% in the S&P 500 and just over 10% in the Russell 3000, make up a very small proportion of total compensation for directors. And for other compensation, which can be anything from perquisites to travel benefits, etc., etc., something I think we might look into next week. There's about 9.9% of directors in the Russell 3000 receive some form of other compensation. but it's almost a third in the S&P 500, 29.7% receiving other compensation in the S&P 500. As I said, that might be something we want to look into next week, a bit more detail at least. So that's our look at the comparisons between those two indices. And what I'm going to do now is just switch to just the S&P 500 and look at the development of direct compensation over time. And I'm sure that this kind of development will be mimicked for most of the directors in the Russell 3000 as well. But what we've seen is a steady decline in the proportion of directors receiving meeting fees, from 12.3% in 2019, as I said, down to 7.6% in the S&P 500 in 2023 proxy filings. We've seen not a steady, but an increase in the number of directors receiving stock awards from 95.7% to 96.1% over that same time period, 2019 to 2023. And again, actually a slight decrease in the proportion of directors receiving a cash retainer from 98.4% down to 97.7%. Not a huge difference, but a difference nevertheless. For stock options, again, it's actually during the period it's jiggled around basically the same proportion from 7.5% in 2019 to 7.4% in 2023. But actually the proportion of directors receiving other compensation, other forms of compensation, has risen from 23.5% in 2019 relatively steadily up to 29.7% in 2023. So there are not large changes. Direct compensation tends not to change very dramatically. As I said, the biggest change has been the demise of the stock option and the increase in the amount of stock awards being awarded to directors. So I think, next week I think we're going to have a closer look at that other compensation figure and have a look and see what some of those amounts are. So this is Paul Hodgson signing off for Edge Gauge Statistic of the Week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Wow. Paul throwing heat, and some timely heat too, because we're just talking about director compensation and it getting all clawed back.
Thank you, S-Gauge.
Thanks, S-Gauge, for sponsoring our show. That's Damien Rollis. I was full of BS. Now I guess I'm full of BM. I don't know how that's going to work going forward. I don't think I like it. We are Free Float. This show is also sponsored by freefloatanalytics.com. Go underneath the little login button is a free sign up. You can get the S&P 500, every director, their influence and power, their performance. It's all there for you to see and check out. Until Friday, when we do a week wrap up, I have a big announcement today. Well, yesterday, Ari had her baby. Woo! So Ari won't be on the show for a little while.
Oh, even better. Yeah.
We won't see her for a while. Ari and baby are healthy. It's a little baby boy. I got to see him yesterday. And we'll tell you more on Friday. But otherwise, tune in then. Until then, goodbye.